I owe Argyle a serious apology because, as terrible as it might have been, last night, at the time of recording this, I would go and watch a movie that would somehow be even worse than Argyle. Now, before anything else, let me go ahead and admit something. Like so many other people right now, I am suffering superhero fatigue. With a few exceptions, like Beyond the Spider-Verse and The Batman Part 2, I generally just don't care about whatever comes out next for superhero movies. I don't doubt the possibility that James Gunn's DC reboot could turn out good, but I don't think I have it in me to really care about it all that much. And then aside from maybe Deadpool 3, there's literally nothing in the MCU now that it's like I actually care about. Nothing that I'm actually interested in watching. Now, I understand this might seem like a controversial thing to say at first, but just hear me out. I'm not interested in James Gunn's version of the DC universe, nor am I interested in whatever the MCU is going to do next. Well, you know what I've taken an interest in recently? You know what's a cinematic universe that I'm interested in seeing more of in the future? The Sonyverse, as I'll call it. All those, like, Sony Spider-Man villain movies. Venom and Morbius, and that's it so far. I have an interest in those. And the reason why I'm interested in seeing more of these movies, even though they're not good movies at all, is because at least they're entertainingly bad. At least they're fun in how bad they are. The Venom movies are just stupid, dumb fun. They're not cinema, obviously. They're junk movies, but it's like an instance where like you just kind of embrace that status. You just embrace the junk movie status that both of these movies have. And then you have Morbius, one of the movies ever made, the first movie to make $20 more billion at the box office, needs no introduction, a landmark in modern cinema, a movie that is so f***ing stupid, so bad, that it's just, I unironically cannot hate Morbius or consider it a terrible movie. I saw it opening night with a friend, and we were just laughing at how bad the movie was. It's just such a stupid movie, but at least I'm able to enjoy it because of that. It's not good, obviously, but at least I'm able to get some form of enjoyment out of watching it. In comparison, I look at like the modern MCU, and it's like most of the movies that are coming out now for the MCU is just boring shit in comparison. Stuff like Ant-Man 3 and Eternals are just, they're just cures for insomnia. They're snore fests. There's like nothing interesting that happens in these movies. There's nothing funny bad in them. The only thing that's funny bad about like Ant-Man 3 is the design for MODOK, and that's it. And even then, when you take into consideration the stressful working conditions that the VFX artists at Marvel Studios have to undergo, being overworked and underpaid, constantly working on these movies, getting little pay, it becomes less funny. Stuff like this and the floating head of that kid from Thor Love and Thunder, it's not as funny. It seems funny bad at first, but once you realize how the artists behind these movies are treated, it becomes less funny. Morbius is a worse movie than the Marvels in terms of quality, but at least like Morbius is funny bad, whereas the Marvels is just probably boring as hell. So like in a way, Morbius is kind of better than the Marvels. The Sonyverse is worse than modern MCU, but it's also better than modern MCU at the same time. Well, at least that's the case for the first three movies. I recently watched Madam Web in theaters, expecting it to be another glorious train wreck of a movie. Something that I would look back on as an ironic masterpiece. Something that I could ironically praise and maybe, I guess you could say, a guilty pleasure of sorts. Something so stupid, idiotic, that's just, you're just laughing at how bad it is. The large amount of negative reviews. I feel like this movie has like severely worse reviews than Morbius, which is That's saying a lot. Plus, you had that one line from the trailers that would go on to become a meme, which I regret to inform you all that this line isn't in the movie itself. Disappointing, I know. I went into this expecting it to be just a perfect disaster, something funny bad, something so bad it's good, something that like I could look at as a terrible movie, but at least it's like a terrible movie that I can have fun watching. Something entertainingly bad. What I end up getting instead is quite possibly the worst superhero movie I have ever seen. I don't mean that in like, oh, this movie is funny bad. No, this is actually fucking awful. This is not funny bad. This is not like Morbius. I unironically think Morbius is a better movie than this. I'm not making any haha Morbin time jokes. I'm being serious. I sincerely believe with all of my heart that Morbius is a significantly better, significantly more enjoyable movie than Madam Web. This is worse than like almost all the modern MCU movies. Like, yeah, Thor, Love and Thunder and whatever is bad, but like it's not worse than this. Not even close to being as bad as this. I'm gonna admit that I haven't watched that many DCEU movies. I know that it has a very divisive reception, but like there's no way that any of the movies are worse than this. Like, not even The Flash. Yes, I'm gonna f***ing go there. I genuinely think The Flash is a better movie. Just slightly better than Madam Web. I think it's a slightly less bad movie than Madam Web. This movie fails on so many different things, but like it's not even an entertaining failure like Morbius. It's boring as hell. I'm gonna just start that off right now. This movie is boring. There's barely anything interesting that happens in this movie. This is a superhero movie, obviously, but it's like, it doesn't even feel like a superhero movie. There's no like fighting scenes, there's no action scenes, there's nothing like that at all. The movie starts off with a woman who would turn out to be the mother of Cassie, the film's main protagonist, and Ezekiel, who's like the main antagonist of the movie. This scene takes place in 1973, and it involves the two of them trying to look for this extremely rare spider that can like have healing powers or something like that. It could like give people powers or something. I'm not sure. Eventually, Cassie's mom finds the spider, only for Ezekiel to just betray her and like the other like crew members that were there. It's during this part where we get the only sort of backstory regarding why Ezekiel is evil. Cassie's mom brings up that the spider's powers could help out people in need, and Ezekiel brings up that other people don't need help when his parents didn't get any help when they were starving, and that's it basically. That's all the motivations that this guy has. You learn nothing else about this character. You learn nothing else about why he's evil. You just get that brief statement that like his parents were starving and that's it. It's just incredibly lazy writing. It's at the very beginning of the movie as well, so it's like you just completely forget about it midway into the movie. Midway into the movie, you're just thinking like, why does this guy want the spider all to himself? Why is he keeping it all to himself? Why is he evil in the first place? And it's like this one brief throwaway line is all that you get. So then Ezekiel shoots Cassie's mom, and then this like tribe of people that like are dressed up as Spider-Man, they find the body of Cassie's mom and they manage to give birth to Cassie. And it's like they give the baby powers, I believe, which is like the main thing for the movie, obviously. And then we cut to many years later in 2003. Cassie is now a fully grown adult woman who works as a paramedic. And then you also have Ezekiel as well, who is like, somehow he hasn't aged at all, even though this is supposed to be set in 2003. Like the opening scene is meant to be in 1973, and then the present day is 2003. That's a good 30 years, and yet somehow he hasn't aged at all. This guy still looks exactly the same 30 years later. So the main superpower gimmick of the movie is Cassie is able to briefly see the future, see different glimpses of the future, and so it's up to her to prevent that future from happening. Like, she could see someone and then she'll get like a glimpse of something tragic happening to that person, and so like she tries to prevent that tragic thing from happening. And I guess Ezekiel has it as well. It's only like one time in the movie does he use it. There's a scene early on in the movie where like he appears much older. He basically has this glimpse of 3 girls in costumes just murdering him, and I believe they steal the spider for themselves. It's like a frequent vision that he has. And so for most of the movie, he tries tracking down these 3 girls and stopping them to make sure that his death doesn't happen. He doesn't get murdered. He steals like a card or something like that. He manages to like hack the security system for the city, so he's able to get like traffic cams and whatnot, security cameras in like subways and whatnot, stations, in all those places, in order to find these 3 girls that he frequently sees in his visions. As Cassie climbs aboard a subway train, she conveniently comes across all 3 of the girls that Ezekiel is trying to stop, and it turns out to make things even more convenient, she's actually previously met these 3 characters early on at random points throughout the movie, something that all 4 of them acknowledge. She gets a glimpse into the future and sees Ezekiel try and stop the 3 girls, which prompts her to warn the girls to get off the train and to follow her. They end up driving down to the middle of nowhere. Cassie leaves the 3 girls behind alone in the forest for reasons. I guess to do further research on this, I have no idea. The 3 girls end up finding a diner, even though they're supposed to say a secret. They're not supposed to be seen out in public. Ezekiel ends up showing up to the diner, and thankfully Cassie shows up in time to stop him. And there's just... Let me explain something. There is like no action scenes in this movie. There's no like epic like fight, battle, anything of that sort between Cassie and the girls and Ezekiel. There's like nothing like that. The only times we get like a confrontation of sorts between Cassie and Ezekiel is they both involve Cassie hitting Ezekiel with a car. The first time she drives a taxi into the diner, hitting Ezekiel, and the second time she drives an ambulance into Ezekiel in the middle of a street. And that's about it, basically. There's like no action scenes at all in the movie. Most of it is just running away from Ezekiel, and that's it. And it's like Ezekiel doesn't even do like anything interesting either, like a villain, you know, would do. He has this Spider-Man-esque suit, and it's like, he does nothing with it at all. There's no like weapons, there's nothing like that. All he does with it is walk on walls, and that's it. The final confrontation between the girls and Ezekiel is just... It's basically a sign is what stops Ezekiel. Cassie is able to like strengthen her powers, and she's like able to like make clones of herself appear, like these ghost clones of herself appear, and like she saves the 3 girls who are all like hanging on ledges and are on the verge of death. She also manages to stop Ezekiel, crushing him with this like sign, this Pepsi Cola sign, because, you know, product placement, baby. It's worth noting as well that like early into the movie, when Cassie first gets her powers, or like the first time you see her powers at all, she's trying to save someone that's like stuck inside of a car that's crashed and is like close to falling off a bridge, and she manages to free the guy. However, she ends up falling with the car into the ocean, and there's like a brief scene where she's just underwater, and like all this like crap is around, like this like ghost sort of stuff, mist stuff, to like, I guess, foreshadow what's gonna happen later on in the movie. And then like one of the things you see is just this giant red S completely out of context. And so when I saw this scene much later on where like Ezekiel gets crushed by the giant red S, it's like, oh my god, bro, there is actually no way. There is actually no way, seriously. There's also a flashback scene where like Cassie finds out why her mom went to the Amazon to find the spider to begin with. It turns out she got diagnosed with like a rare disease that cannot be cured, and she wants to get that spider to like help cure her. And it's like with this scene where she finds out what happened to her mom, and and like how she died, why she never got to know her mom at all. It's worth noting as well, I could have missed this part of the movie, I'm not sure, so if there's someone out there that likes this movie for some reason, then correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure, like, Cassie just kind of raised herself. Like, I brought up how, like, the tribe at the beginning of the movie, they helped give birth to Cassie. They helped her out. And that's it, basically. It's never explicitly stated if it's, like, she lived with this tribe for, like, her childhood and whatnot. And then when she became an adult, she would move to the city. It's nothing like that at all. It's not like a Tarzan thing where she was raised with the tribe. And so she's not accustomed to city life or anything of that sort. As far as I'm aware, her dad is never mentioned once in the entire movie. He's just non-existent. So it's like, who the was taking care of Cassie for like most of her life between 1973 and 2003. Literally, the movie shows the tribe delivering Cassie as a baby, and then it just abruptly cuts to Cassie as an adult working as a paramedic. Like, there's no explanation. Like, what happened to her childhood? What happened in her childhood between 1973 and 2003? Did she live in the Amazon with the tribe? Did they send her to New York? Like, what happened? Nothing is explained at all. Like, where is her dad in all of this? Does she even have a dad? Is her dad dead as well? Like, what's going on? This is such bad writing. I've never seen writing this bad before in a movie. Was she raised in the tribe and then like she moved to New York when she grew up and became an adult? Like what happened? I don't get it. It makes no sense at all. But anyways, in this flashback scene, Cassie starts crying and, you know, she hugs her mom, and it's meant to be a sad emotional scene, but the thing is, like, there's all these like edits and whatever, there's all these like jump cuts and whatnot that can, like, it's just annoying to look at. It could, like, it's a kind of seizure inducing, especially when you're looking at this in a giant screen in like a nearly pitch black room, the only sort of lighting being from the screen. It can be like hard on the eyes, so it's like if you have epilepsy, then well, there you go, there's another one of the many reasons why you shouldn't watch this movie. It turns out as well that the three girls, they also don't have parents. Their parents are either deceased or they're in prison or they're far away. They're not living with their parents. They make up lies of like why they're not with their parents, and then like they eventually reveal like the reality of why they're not with their parents. So I guess at the end, Cassie just adopts all three together. I'm not sure. Almost nothing interesting happens in this movie. I think that's like the main problem. There's just nothing like interesting at all. At least like Morbius and Venom, at least they try to have like stuff happens in Morbius and Venom. At least there's stuff that happens in them, whereas like there's almost nothing interesting. Like there's no fight scene, as I mentioned before, at all in the movie. There's nothing like that. Only like at the very end do the characters appear in any sort of costume. I believe the trailers made it out to be like the three girls have like costumes and it would be like a big thing in the movie, when in reality, like, they're only in the costumes 2 times in the entire movie. The first time you see the girls in the costumes, it's during that like future glimpse, whatever that prediction, foreshadow thing that Ezekiel has. And then the second time is at the very end of the movie, where they tease like Madam Web and the 3 girls and whatnot. It's clearly meant to be sequel baiting, which, well, I mean, considering the critical reception of this movie, yeah, this ain't getting a sequel, that's for sure. This isn't even, like, an ironically funny movie like Morbius either. Like, Morbius has, like, stupidly funny moments in it. There's nothing like that in Madam Web. It's just boring as hell to watch. There's almost nothing interesting in it at all. There's nothing good that I can say about this movie. Argylle might have been a bad movie, but like at least there were good things that I could say about it. There were positives to Argylle. There were redeeming qualities. I thought the cast for Argyle was really good. You know, I thought Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Bryan Cranston, my goat, Samuel L. Jackson, you know, I thought they were all good in it. Like, as I mentioned in the review that I made for Argyle, I would talk about how Bryan Cranston would just steal every scene that he was in. He basically carried the entire movie. And Samuel L. Jackson, even though his character barely appears in the movie, he's also like great in every scene that he's in for what little runtime his character has. As mentioned in the Argyle review as well, I went into it expecting it to be a dumb, entertaining spy action comedy, and on rare occasions it could be that. There are rare moments where the movie is just enjoyable. I wanted this to be one of those that turn off your brain and just have a good time movies, and on rare occasions it could have been that. Like, there's action scenes in Argyle that, like, some of them are actually decent, some of them are pretty good for what they are. At least, like, stuff happens in Argyle. At least, like, there's an attempt to make like an interesting story, a story that like the audience could care about. There's at least an attempt. The main problem that I have with Argyle is that the plot for it is just confusing as hell to follow. It's just filled to the brim with all of these different plot twists and whatnot, and it gives you a hard time trying to understand like what's going on, you know, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, who's dead, who's alive, you know, stuff like that. Whereas like nothing interesting happens in Madame Web at all. There's just a nothing burger movie. Some could argue that a movie that's confusing as hell to sit through is worse than a movie that has nothing interesting happen in it, but I don't know, honestly. I'd kind of go with Argyle, because again, there are a few decent moments in Argyle. I actually could see Argyle being a good movie. I don't think I could say the same for Madame Web. Say whatever you want to say about like modern MCU. Say whatever you want to say about like Love and Thunder and Ant-Man 3, but it's like, at least stuff happens in those movies. At least, you know, there's stuff in them. Maybe there's like rare moments where I could see like, oh, okay, this could have been good actually. At least like the Venom movies and Morbius, at least it's like stuff happens in them. Like there's things that happen. They have fight scenes and whatnot in them. Like there's just like, there's actually like stuff in them that like happen. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for saying The Flash is a better movie than Madame Web, because there are definitely a lot of things that make The Flash a terrible movie. You have Ezra Miller, who's an awful person, and this is not going to be one of those separate the art from the artist movies, because their presence in the movie cannot be ignored. It is hard to watch this movie without thinking of all the awful stuff they have done. Not to mention as well, you have those disrespectful CGI cameos of like Christopher Reeve as Superman and Adam West as Batman, and yet despite that, I still think The Flash is a slightly better movie than Madame Web, because at least there's stuff that happens in The Flash. At least there's things that happen in it. At least I can remember a lot of the stuff that happens in The Flash. Most likely, I'm gonna forget Madame Web. Like, there's nothing memorable, notable in this movie at all. It's just a complete nothing burger, a complete waste of time of a movie. And as awful of a movie as The Flash might be, it does have one good thing about it, and that's Michael Keaton as Batman. So there's that. I genuinely cannot think of a good thing to say about Madame Web. I cannot think of a redeeming quality to Madame Web. I cannot think of anything good to say about it at all. I think this movie perfectly exemplifies why superhero movies are a dying genre. I feel like this might be the nadir of superhero movies. This might actually be the rock bottom. I've been thinking about this a lot after watching the movie, and it's like, I do believe genuinely that this might be the worst superhero movie I've ever seen. One of the worst superhero movies ever made. Easily. Admittedly, I probably shouldn't say this because I didn't watch it until long after it received a critical re-evaluation, but I have to wonder, how the hell did people look at Spider-Man 3 back in 2007 and they thought it was bad? They somehow thought it was garbage. Spider-Man 3, I unironically think is a much better movie than most modern superhero movies. I get more enjoyment out of Spider-Man 3 than I do like most of the modern MCU movies. I would rather watch Spider-Man 3 over like Thor Love and Thunder or The Flash or Madam Web or anything like that. I unironically think it's a better movie. Spider-Man 3 can best be described as a flawed masterpiece. It is the only movie I could think of where the flaws just make it kind of better in a way, if that makes any sense. I know that 2007 was a different time. I know that like Spider-Man 3 was the last big superhero movie to come out before the genre just completely changed the next year with Iron Man and The Dark Knight. But still, if only they knew how much worse things would get for superhero movies, and that we would end up looking at Spider-Man 3 as an amazing movie in comparison. Like, I'm surprised we still consider Batman and Robin to be a bad movie. I'm gonna admit that I have never seen Batman and Robin, so it might not be a good idea for me to say all this, but I don't care. I look at images of Batman and Robin. I look at like clips from it. It looks like a stupidly entertaining movie. It looks like just dumb, goofy fun. I look at like the colorful imagery in the movie and I think like, how the hell is this movie considered bad now? Considering how bad superhero movies are now, I would have thought there would be like a critical re-evaluation for Batman and Robin as this goofy, cheesy classic, this peak guilty pleasure movie, but no, that hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened somehow. I don't care what people say. I refuse to believe that this movie is worse than most modern superhero movies. I straight up refuse to believe that. There is not a chance in hell that this movie is worse than a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the superhero movie genre now. Something I've thought of quite a bit with superhero fatigue is, when will superhero fatigue finally settle in and the superhero movie genre just completely dies? Because right now we seem to be going through a downward slope where people are starting to lose interest. More people are starting to lose interest in superhero movies, yet they aren't completely dead yet. And I have to wonder, when is that point gonna happen where superhero movies completely die off and the genre just becomes completely irrelevant? I have no idea when that'll happen. I have no idea what will be the movie that'll cause superhero fatigue to finally take over and the superhero movie genre will become fully irrelevant. But I do think Madam Web comes dangerously close to just completely ending the superhero movie genre. Just like that. Am I gonna watch the future Sonyverse movies when they come out? Am I gonna watch Venom 3 or Kraven the Hunter or whatever when they come out? Maybe. Because surely they cannot be worse than this. At least those can be like entertainingly bad. Kraven the Hunter is for sure gonna be garbage, but at least maybe, hopefully, it'll be entertaining garbage. And considering the first two Venom movies are just dumb, stupid fun, who's to say Venom 3 won't be dumb, stupid fun either? It's crazy how, like, the Venom movies are the only ones that, like, one could argue are actually unironically good movies. But I don't think there's gonna be anyone out there looking at Madam Web and thinking, yeah, this is unironically a good movie. It's not even, like, ironically enjoyable either. There's no, like, stupid, entertaining moments in it like Morbius. Is just a miserable experience all around. What an awful movie, man. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I can't wait for the 2025 Oscars. I can't wait to see if Madam Web or Argyle will win Best Picture, because the competition is strong, let's just put it that way. I would add Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate into the mix, but unfortunately, as we all know, the Oscars are notoriously biased against animation. They don't understand that animation is cinema and not a genre for kids, so unfortunately, I don't think a masterpiece like Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate will be acknowledged by the Oscars, even though it's already received widespread critical acclaim as one of the greatest movies ever made before it even came out. Such a shame, really. Such a shame. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time. Adios.